Hi, my name is Paul Mason. I'm observing International Women's Day with you here on Camaragal land, which is traditionally women's country, a place of saltwater law, ceremony and culture. As a son, a brother and a father, it's a real honour to be contributing to some of the talks that are happening today as part of International Women's Day. I was filled with a lot of gratitude and felt very honoured when Michelle invited me to be part of this event. It's raising money for an important cause, and International Women's Day is a really important occasion to celebrate the achievements of women around the world, to observe and acknowledge some of the challenges still being faced by women in diverse cultural contexts, and also to address some of the inequalities that are persisting around the world today. Addressing some of these inequalities won't happen by listening to one gender alone. Men and women and people of diverse gender identities need to come together to work towards a better future, work towards equal opportunities and equal responsibilities in a more sustainable, healthier world. The suffragettes are one of the first groups of people that come to mind when we think about some of the first efforts to address gender inequality. When we think about that historical period, when we think about that historical moment, it's very easy to overlook the tremendous cognitive transformation that took place in people's minds to really challenge accepted practices, to question the status quo, and to disrupt the everyday thinking about what it was to be a man and what it was to be a woman in society. I run an online interview series called Idioms of Normality, and I ask people from diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise the very simple question, and yet also very complicated question: what is normal? And I always get some really fascinating discussion generated simply from this question: what is normal? In rhetoric, we often hear people say, yes, but what is normal? Or they blow it off and say, yes, there's no such thing as normal. But when you really take that question seriously and you question normality, the way that we experience it, the way that we believe in it, or the way in which we pursue it, then you can really unpack some of the ways in which present day practices are impacting negatively upon certain populations. There are a couple of women that I've interviewed in this series that I really want to highlight today. One is Elizabeth Shove, who wrote this fantastic book, Comfort, Cleanliness and Convenience: The Social Organisation of Normality. The reason I love this book is because she demonstrates and unpacks the way in which society organises itself and rallies behind the concept of normality and recruits resources, extracts wealth from the planet, and drives consumerist practices in the pursuit of normality. And it's a fascinating read, and it's a fascinating way to really address some of the problems in the world today, because some of the problems that we need to address in society today are not the problems that are easy to point the finger at. Some of the problems that we need to address in society today are the problems that we ourselves are complicit in. Another book that I'd really love to highlight to you is this book, Normality, A Critical Genealogy, co-authored by Peter Kreil and Elizabeth Stevens. And I had the opportunity to interview Elizabeth Stevens in the series Idioms of Normality, and we got to discuss some of the history behind the concept of normality. What's really interesting in the discussion that we had was the way in which we cannot understand gender or issues of gender distinct from issues of race, age or ability. So some of the statistics that were being generated by women for women were very racist, were very age specific, and were also very ableist. very oriented towards people of certain abilities. So let me just go on a complete tangent here for a second and tell you about where the concept of normality comes from. It's actually really, really young. It's not a concept that has been around for lots and lots of years. It's not a concept that's universal either. It's a concept that was born in a very specific social and historical setting, in a very particular moment. And for some reason, it has been this incredibly invasive concept that has spread across the world. The concept of normality dates back to 1840, or the 1840s. And it was created by an astronomer, actually, called Adolf Kettler, who didn't get a job in astronomy. He ended up working in what we would call today demography, but in what was called back in the day political arithmetic or political statecraft. And he borrowed this term from carpentry, the norm, and in fact this is a norm here, it's a right angle. It was an instrument used by carpenters to measure right angles, and he borrowed that word for norm and applied it to a mathematical equation that he misappropriated from astronomy and applied to human populations. So when we think about the average, this is actually a calculation used for a single moving object, a planet around the sun. If you want to work out where you expect a planet to be at a certain particular point in time, then you have to take multiple calculations of where the planet has been, average them out, and then you've got an idea of the law of errors of where the planet might be at any particular point in time. Because you need to average out this data set, because planets wobble a little bit. They don't perfectly orbit the sun. They're not always exactly where you think they should be. Anyway, this is a calculation very specifically designed for a single moving object. A single inanimate moving object. And Adolf Kettler took that calculation and applied it to human populations. Human populations are composed of discrete individuals, each with their own developmental trajectory. So not only was this a misappropriation of arithmetic methods, he was also projecting very idealistic values onto human populations by saying that if we work out what is somewhere in the middle of a population and uphold that as the ideal within a population, then we are generating momentum and trying to rally people behind very specific standards. Now, to understand a standard as a single thing is perhaps problematic, and Elizabeth Stevens points out that we need to understand normality and standards not as a single thing, but as a system. Normality has written itself into our system. We are often blind to normality's influence because it has become the water to the fish. We have become the frog in the frying pan of normality. And I think it's really important to question normality. Sometimes we are so used to the stereotypes that we recruit in order to make sense of everyday life that we overlook some of the inequalities. We overlooked some of the missed opportunities. Why am I interested in challenging our understanding of normality? Is because it will lead to greater social inclusion. The myth of normality, I believe, is an obstacle to self-fulfillment. Our pursuit of normality, our pursuit for clearer skin, for a tighter waist, for a certain body shape, our pursuit of certain cultural ideals that are always somehow constantly out of reach, not only drives consumerism, it also drives our own anxiety, our depression, our rates of obsessive compulsive disorder. It is problematic. And if we can somehow dismantle this concept of normality and get rid of it from our psyche, then we can possibly remove a massive obstacle to our self-fulfillment. We will also be removing a massive obstacle to social inclusion. If we hold others accountable for their normality, and in doing so also hold ourselves up to very high standards of normality, then we are doing an injustice on other people and ourselves. Thirdly, we're also impacting negatively upon the planet. Our collective pursuit for normality. As Elizabeth Shove points out, our collective pursuit of normality, the way in which we have rallied behind certain standards and accepted cultural practices, is detrimentally harming the rest of nature. We are having a negative impact on the planet because of our illusion of normality. One thing I've noticed in looking at the concept of normality in literature, in academic research, in conversations with experts and with people from diverse cultural backgrounds, is that we often hold others accountable for challenging their sense of normality, but we rarely turn that dialogue on ourselves. And we rarely really truly challenge practices and behaviors that we have come to accept as normal in our own lives. And I think if we are going to make the world a better place for men and women and people of diverse gender identities, then we really need to start challenging the normality that we have come to believe in ourselves. Happy International Women's Day. I hope that you can start really interrogating this question, normality, whenever it comes up. And not just dismissively, yes, but what is normal? Really take that question seriously. If you hear someone say the word normal, or if you start realizing how pervasive this concept is in our actions and our behaviors, then perhaps we can ally ourselves to dismantling it, to disrupting it, to resisting it.